Venus and star blessings, everybody. So today I want to talk about transiting Neptune. That's just moved into its direct motion. So there is Neptune there. And it's been retrograde the last 6 months or so. And now moving direct. I guess the first place I want to start is to draw a definition of what Neptune is all about. And this definition primarily comes from evolutionary astrology. So I'll just read this statement to you. Neptune correlates with the phenomena of consciousness itself, consciousness in human form. It correlates to infinity and thus timelessness, ultimate reality versus man-made realities. It correlates to the source of all things and our natural relationship to the source. It correlates to the ultimate meaning versus temporal meaning that we give things that ultimately have no meaning when measured against ultimate meaning. It correlates with transcendence and the need to transcend temporal reality. Many people are born with Neptune retrograde. I'm one of those people. And Jeffrey Wolf Green has some really interesting thoughts around being born with Neptune retrograde. So that'll be, half of the population basically, right? Because Neptune is retrograde for, about half of the year. So yeah, half of the population will be born with Neptune retrograde and the other half will be born with Neptune direct. It's very complex, but there's some interesting comments. So, for example, being born with Neptune retrograde, because Neptune corresponds to the collective conscious and the collective unconscious, it essentially encapsulates, you could say, the thoughts and feelings and energy and psychic imprints and traumas and everything of the entire collective human family. And not only the souls that are incarnate on the planet now, but just souls in general, and also every soul has had potentially multiple lifetimes, right? So these memories are imprinted in the soul. And when you are born with Neptune retrograde, there can be some souls that are born with Neptune retrograde are highly, highly, highly sensitive souls. And there's a few things about that. It can speak to lots of mental health issues, for instance, can occur with people who have Neptune retrograde at birth. There can be such a powerful memory and imprint of past experiences that were quite traumatic or quite painful. And as the soul reincarnates into the world, again, that memory is so strong and can be very easily triggered by the harsh reality in which we live in. Not that everything about reality is harsh. There is obviously a lot of beauty in the world, in life, in people, but from I suppose from a bigger picture, lifelong kind of level, there are a lot of things going on that are very harsh, are very difficult, are very painful to witness or to experience. And my point is that a lot of souls born with Neptune retrograde are just a lot more super sensitive to that harshness of reality. And so what's the result of that? The result can be a need to withdraw from the world, disengage from the world. That's one of the things that seems to happen. And also needing a lot more sleep as well is a pretty common symptom, if you like, of Neptune retrograde, because there's this sense of needing to go back to the womb, to mother, to spirit mother, right? Because Neptune encapsulates and holds the entirety of everything. So when Neptune is retrograde, we too can go through that process where we disengage or withdraw a lot more. And a lot of that process is about reaching for something deeper within us that enables us to connect more deeply to source itself. Because with Neptune, fundamentally, what we are experiencing or trying to find is the divine in things, in life, in someone, or in something. And one of the key words that I like to use for Neptune, which is very rarely mentioned, is the word disappointment. It never really comes up. When I hear people speaking about Neptune, I rarely hear them mention that word. And I like to remind people that that is a very important word for Neptune, period, and especially when you are having significant Neptune passages, transits in your chart. And the disappointment arises because Neptune is the soul's desire, you could say, to reconnect back with God or goddess, right? So it's the seeking of the totality, the source creation of all things. It's the seeking of that from a soul level. And because we live in a dual reality, in a third dimension reality, with an ego and a personality and a physical body, and the density of the world, our eyes, our physical eyes, that is, are very much influenced and drawn to what we see and what we think we see and what we want to see. So there's a lot of projection that goes on. When Neptune touches us, it's a very hypnotic energy. It's very seductive. Seductive is a good word for Pluto as well, but it is also for Neptune. There's a sense of feeling hypnotized and seduced into really desiring very deeply that God or goddess experience. And so because God or goddess, in the ultimate sense, we can't see the source creation to all things in a physical form, as in a human being. God and goddess is in all of us and in everything, but it has no form in its essence. The form comes in because of this dual physical reality, and also because of what we project outside of ourselves as well. So God, goddess, God source creation to all things. Neptune is formless and boundless and infinite and cannot be held and contained and controlled. So when we project that Neptune energy onto anything, although for the most part we are not conscious of this, what we are really seeking is the God experience, if you like, from that particular thing or person that we are projecting that Neptune onto. It's vastly an unconscious process. So I'm bringing this up because if you've had Neptune transiting particularly any of your personal planets whilst it's been retrograde, and any of your angles as well, if you have the right time of birth, of course, because if your time of birth is wrong by even 10 minutes, then the degrees on the angles can change significantly depending on where you were born on the earth, depending on what house system you use. You know, there's a lot of variables there for sure. But because Neptune is such a slow moving body, you know, if your time is not correct and the angles change significantly, then Neptune may have already passed over that angle, or maybe it's yet to arrive on that angle and you think it's there because you don't have the right time of birth. So that's just one important factor just to be aware of. When it comes to the personal planets, however, even if you have no time of birth, it doesn't matter, because you'll still know when Neptune is forming a conjunction, an opposition, a square, a trine, etc., to one of your personal planets. And if you've had Neptune transiting one of your personal planets, you would definitely be feeling it and be experiencing a number of different things depending on what the planet is, of course. For instance, I've had transiting Neptune conjunct my Venus. I have Venus in Pisces for the last nearly 2 years, and I've got one last passage left. It was a 5-passage transit, so it's the biggest transit you can get with any planet. Normally, it is 3 passages with the outer planets mostly. But it can also be 5 passages, and that's what it's been for me. And it has been a doozy. It has been a really interesting, for lack of a better word, transit and journey. And I'm bringing it up because I started talking a moment ago about if you are born with Neptune retrograde, there appears to be something there about that soul that has a bigger sensitivity. Let me just read this statement to you. As humans, of course, we are all part of this collective consciousness and unconsciousness. When Neptune is retrograde, the soul is much more inwardly sensitized to the impact of both the collective consciousness and the unconsciousness. And this increased insensitivity can then deeply affect the psychological state of the consciousness of the Neptune retrograde soul. Now, that comment is specifically referring to a person who's born with Neptune retrograde. You may or you may not relate with that. I certainly do. And just to use an example, from the point of view of what's happening in the Middle East at the moment, and my very intense sensitivity about that matter, which I've had a lot of backlash about, and a lot of criticism and a lot of judgment, and you name it, and it's come from all streams of social media. And I knew that would happen anyway, but because I am so extremely sensitive, yes, I'm very sensitive to those comments, but it doesn't mean that I will stop speaking on matters that have to do with humanity, fairness, justice, equality, peace, harmony, war crimes. As I've said in my previous video that I posted yesterday on Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Scorpio, and so on and so forth, I feel that I have a spiritual duty to do that. And again, I knew it would attract, a lot of opposing or conflicting or dividing perspectives, comments, and the like, right? Such is life. That's just how it is. But with what I was going to say was, because I'm a Neptune retrograde soul, I was born with Neptune retrograde. And at the moment, as I said, I've had Neptune passing over my Venus the last couple of years, and Venus is in Pisces. So that within itself, from an evolutionary perspective, also speaks to having lived a lot of lifetimes where some traumas and things have occurred. In other words, I'm a highly sensitive soul. So Neptune passing over my Venus and being a Neptune retrograde soul simply means this, that the the circumstances that are occurring in the Middle East at the moment, I'm feeling them in such a way that I honestly cannot even articulate. And I know from deep inside my heart and soul that when I'm witnessing and observing and noticing what is happening, it's happening in real time, as it were, from the point of view of this Saturn world. But I can feel inside me that something much deeper is being triggered and activated, hence my extreme sensitivity on this subject, and extreme compassion and desire to want to support and speak up on it. And again, I just want to reiterate to those of you listening who have either misinterpreted or not heard what I've said, I'll say it again. I'm not choosing a side. I'm just choosing humanity, period. Now, somebody wrote a comment on my Facebook page saying that I shouldn't be focusing on it. I should just focus on spreading love and light. And my response to that is I am spreading love and light. In fact, I am a beacon of light. I know that deep inside my heart and soul. But that does not mean that I cannot shine the light on the darkness as well. And that's all I'm trying to do. So if you were born with Neptune retrograde, you may find that you are just a lot more in tune with the collective unconscious, right? Which means that you are picking up, it's like you've got these psychic antennas, and people with a strong 12th house emphasis can also experience this as well, by the way. It's a strong experience of these psychic antennas just picking up on the frequency and vibration emitted in the ether by the entire collective. And it's not something that any human being can process on a rational psychological level because it's irrational. It's beyond the psychology of the human being. It's so vast and so beyond all of that, that even language would struggle to encapsulate what that actually feels like. Only somebody who feels that can understand what that feels like, not by listening to somebody explaining it, for instance. So if Neptune has been hitting off any of your personal planets, this is likely to be, depends which planet, it depends when the transit began. So there are, again, some variables. But let's just say you are one of those people where Neptune was conjunct or opposite or square one of your personal planets. Well, now that Neptune is about to move direct, it's very likely that this will be the last passage of that 3 or 5 time transit, right, of Neptune to one of your personal planets. And the last passage is quite significant because there is a lot going on in that last passage. Now, in July of next year, Neptune will go retrograde again, I think on the 28th or 29th degree, 29th, I think, which is an anaretic degree, right? So that's clearly, from a bigger picture perspective, that's going to speak to more collective matters that will be finalized, truly finalized and completed, because Pisces 12th house Neptune is about completion. It is about endings. It is about a cycle completing. 12th house, Pisces, Neptune. All those 3 archetypes speak to a process of a closure. So Neptune in Pisces, being the last sign of the zodiac, is clearly finishing something huge from an evolutionary perspective that speaks to the collective unconscious, most of which we don't even understand. So for the next, until Neptune goes into Aries, we're still really overseeing or undergoing an immense, intense level of closure relative to Neptune, meaning relative to the reality that we have perceived, either our entire life or either aspects of that reality. All of that is undergoing a very deep process, which would feel like a journey of things dissolving, because Neptune, as I said, because it is the archetype that corresponds to the infinite, infinity, God's source creation to all things, the formless, the collective unconscious, the collective conscious. It encapsulates the entirety of everything, right? So this these last sort of stages of Neptune finishing the journey in Pisces. Now, Neptune spends 14 years in one sign. That's a significant amount of time. And typically especially with the transpersonal planets, because they generally speak to collective trends, transitions, things changing quite dramatically in our construct of reality, our experience of reality. And when they reach the end of the sign, there's an intensified experience of the closure of everything. With Neptune, it's not necessarily intense, but it can be intense from that emotional level. Neptune also corresponds to hysteria, and Neptune retrograde at birth can also be a soul who will feel that collective hysteria a lot more than a soul that doesn't have Neptune retrograde at birth, for instance. And when you've got a number of things going on the earth that are cataclysmic, and when you've got an intensified level of that going on for a few years, which is what we've had since 2019, there is so much going on in the ether of the earth, in the collective consciousness and the collective unconsciousness, that, as I said before, it's very difficult for the human side of us to psychologically process that. So we have these defense mechanisms that will block certain things out, will withdraw from certain things, because there's only so much we can actually humanly cope with, right? But the fact of the matter is, these things are going on physically, spiritually, emotionally, psychologically, and so forth. So Neptune moving direct now, and another sort of feature of that is, well, let me say this. Neptune retrograde typically implies that the soul undergoes a process and a journey where it desires to connect more with God or goddess. It's basically trying to seek the meaning and the deepest meaning to life, right? So it's just trying to find the divinity in everything. So when Neptune is retrograde, it implies that the energy is turned within, right? So it's an internal journey and process that we go through where we might seek out this meaning to life, if you like. And it's a process of constructs of our reality that do not reflect God's source creation to all things, begin to dissolve in our psyche, in our psychology, in our reality. There's a process of things dissolving that can be really frightening for the ego and the personality, really frightening, because the ego and the personality builds a reality, a perspective, a life based on what it sees in this physical reality, if you like, right? So Neptune comes along in a retrograde motion for about 6 months and invites us into going back into the womb, into the spirit source of all things, in the hope that we may find something deeper within ourselves, right? But what can happen in that process as well is there can be a finding of something, if you like, and it's this cyclic sort of process of withdrawing and then coming back out and getting on with it, as it were, or projecting something onto life, a person, people, from that Neptune level, thinking that you've found it here in this church or in this guru or in this teacher or in this school or in this class or in wherever. And just like classic Neptune, the time will come where you realize that actually, no, that's not God. That's not the God source creation to all things. You may have wanted it to be, but it's not actually there. Hence the disappointment factor that follows, because it's a realization of, okay, that's just an aspect of life. That's a human being. That's this situation. That's that condition. That's that dream I had, and so on and so forth. It's a very, very, very tricky, to say the least, energy, Neptune. Whatever the process has meant for us the last 6 months, and if Neptune has been aspecting by transit your personal planets, whatever that has meant for you, whatever has dissolved out of your life, whatever realizations you've had, as Neptune now moves direct, there will be a process that begins where we start to re-engage, reintegrate back into the world, if you like, into this reality, and perhaps trying to bring through and bring forth what we have learnt, how what level of depth has been integrated from a spiritual perspective, what has been dissolved in our life, and the ability to accept that, recognize it, and move forward. I've heard some people say when Neptune goes direct, a lot of people think that now you can start to be more realistic again. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't dispute that some people might feel that. But I think because Neptune corresponds to source and the ultimate truth, and we live in a dual physical reality, it is very, very difficult to find the ultimate truth in a reality outside of ourselves. For a start, the reality that we see with our physical eyes is impermanent. Some things may move and change incredibly slowly, and some things appear not to change much at all, but everything is changing and everything is in motion and everything is impermanent. And Neptune is the complete opposite to that. So the deep soul learning and teachings that we can absorb from a Neptune level really has nothing to do with that reality outside of ourselves. So whatever Neptune has meant for you while it's been retrograde, what I'm getting at is that we can now start, integrating part of that process into our understanding of this reality from a position of spirit and the that it's so hard to find the language for it, such as Neptune. Let me just try and frame this in my mind. I guess, yeah, if Neptune describes what we are seeking at that soul level, meaning merging back with God, Goddess, and Neptune retrograde implies that we may take some kind of journey with that seeking, then when Neptune goes direct, we have assimilated or integrated some very specific process very deeply inside from our soul that we can now integrate into our physical reality. That's what I'm trying to say. So just observe, really, I guess, and just watch, your own life, your own steps, your own projections, your own perceptions, what you have learned, if anything, enables you to move forward in this next passage of Neptune going direct, and how that may assist in your, for lack of a better word, in your spiritual self or spiritual life, right? To be able to distinguish between illusion, projection, to be able to accept and forgive and have compassion and understand the impermanence in life in whatever shape or form it appears, because everything that appears will disappear. Nothing is permanent. And Neptune is a stark reminder of that exact thing, because Neptune, as I said, is formless. It represents what is formless. It represents the ocean and the drop in the ocean, just to use that metaphor. In fact, let's see where I found that comment. I'm not sure where it is. Okay, I'll leave that for a moment. So I guess on a basic, mundane, sort of easy kind of level, if you like, quite apart from the spiritual soul seeking implication of deeply searching and seeking for God, right? Outside of that phenomena, which is the ultimate, really, the other levels of Neptune does strongly correspond to creativity. It also corresponds to the world of glamour and that's very interesting unto itself, because the world of glamour is just such an illusion, right? So Neptune. But from a creative, spiritual, creative perspective, this could be a process where the internal integration and dissolving of things that have been occurring for you the past 6 months, let's say, help you bring forth something very new into your creative process that is inspired by spirit, by Neptune, right? That is inspired from a source that you cannot pinpoint, cannot point your finger and say, there it is, because it's everywhere, it's everything. And it's beyond the linear world, it's beyond the concept of time, it's beyond the experience of something beginning and something ending. It's beyond all those things, right? That's why it's so hard to explain. That's why it's so hard for us to even really understand from a logical perspective, because it's just got nothing to do with logic. So yeah, I guess on a positive level, it may be a process where you can bring through the inspiration, spirit of Neptune through this next journey of your life moving forward from a spiritual and or creative perspective. You know, that would be the most positive, if you like, way of looking at it, or level of influence. The other processes could be more difficult because you may have had Neptune conjunct your sun, which can be terribly challenging for any person, really, because Neptune, whatever it touches, it dissolves what it touches, right? And in our physical form, we like to hold on to things, as our human nature is such that we are human beings that form attachments, right? We attach ourselves to lots of different things. Very difficult to let things go, both in the material world and emotionally, in love, in all those experiences, right? Because especially in the world of love, you know, when we love something or someone, and it feels blissful, and it removes all the barriers and boundaries and fences and walls that we build that otherwise either protect us or keep us separated from others and so forth. Neptune dissolves all those barriers. It dissolves all those structures. It dissolves anything that holds us back from experiencing and feeling that deep source creation to all things, which is infinite. But yes, you know, if you've had Neptune transiting your personal planets, it, you know, for the most part, for most people, it's typically not an easy transit. It can be so bewildering because it can be extremely confusing. And with Neptune, the only thing that's clear is that everything is unclear. That's a fact for many people who experience Neptune transits. So I think I'll close it by saying that with Neptune, we, in our human form, with our personality and our ego, and that's why it's so challenging to do this, because we are made up of those things: personality, ego, physical body, etc. Neptune reminds us of the process of surrendering. Surrendering is a word that can be used so loosely and so lightweight, but the process of surrender is deep, so deep, so deep, and it comes from the soul, not the personality. So that's another thing that Neptune teaches us, especially when Neptune is retrograde. We must learn to surrender at different times with different things, and that's not an easy passage to undertake. And for instance, that could be that an example of that, and I'll give an example that is painful, because that kind of gets the message through easier, I think. When you lose somebody you love, right, in whatever form that is, that's deeply painful, right? And often very difficult to accept, very difficult to let go of. And the very thing you have to do is surrender to that moment. That is Neptune. The surrendering, once we break through the walls of the resistances, the surrendering of Neptune can bring tremendous love and compassion. And I'm not talking about romantic love. Romantic love is Venus. Remember, Neptune is the higher octave of Venus. So the love that Neptune speaks to is the unconditional, infinite love that has no beginning, no end, no limits. And when we can go into some process of surrender, we can tap into that infinite source of love. So I'll leave it there, but before I do, I just also want to say this. So I hope you've stayed right to the end, because this too is an important message that I'd like to give, and that is that there's an astrologer by the name of Erin Sullivan. Some of you may be aware of her, some of you may not. She has been around a very long time. She started astrology back in the, I want to say, very early 80s. She has written many books. She's from the United States of America. I don't know her personally, but I love her books. I've got most of her books. I think she's a brilliant astrologer, and I think she has, really contributed to the astrological community and astrological world. And I've just heard 2 days ago that she's ready to transition as well. So she's in a hospice situation. I felt quite emotional about that when I heard the news, even though I've never met the lady. So I just wanted to say, for those of you that, either have heard of her, or even if you haven't, it'd just be nice to send love and love in her process of transition for her and her family as well. So I just wanted to share that with you guys too. I'll be back with more Mercury retrograde and new moon in a couple of days' time. Actually, I have to get back on here and talk to that. Perhaps I'll come back, talk about the new moon, which will be in Sagittarius, and then also talk about Mercury retrograde. Okay, thank you for your appreciation and love and your understanding of certain things that I have shared about the Middle East specifically, and especially for understanding what I'm trying to communicate about that, and that it's not, it happens to be the Middle East, but that's just something that enables us to identify an area and a group of people. But underneath and beyond all of that is this thing called humanity, which is what I care about, and this thing called love and inclusion, and just simply being an incredibly sensitive soul, which I am. Neptune on my Venus, I'm literally literally, I'm not exaggerating, I feel the pain of every single person over there that has gone. I can feel it inside me, which is why I am so overwhelmed. I can feel the energy, the pain, the trauma, the anguish of infants and children who have either died or who have lost limbs and are still alive. Like I can feel that my empathy is so intense, it's so vast. That's Venus in Pisces. That's the most difficult thing about having Venus in Pisces. Feeling everybody's anguish and pain. And that's not easy to live with. It really isn't. So Venus in Pisces is an exalted position and it has so many beautiful things about it. But I tell you now, in this physical reality, it is very hard. And those of you that are Pisces would know exactly what I'm talking about. See you soon. Much love and peace be upon every soul.